The chandeliers sparkled above the ballroom, casting golden light over gowns stitched with jewels and men in sharp tuxedos. Laughter rang through the air, clinking glasses, whispered promises, and empty compliments that floated like perfume. Alexander Reed stood at the center of it all, the young CEO everyone wanted to impress, but he felt as though he were standing behind glass. The women around him leaned in with painted smiles, their words rehearsed, their elegance a mask. He had seen it all before, the chase for status, the hunger for his wealth, the shallow performances that left him colder each time. His assistant introduced yet another perfect match, a woman who spoke more about her social media followers than the charity event they were attending. Alexander nodded politely, but inside, his heart recoiled. He longed for sincerity, for a voice that wasn't trying to sell itself. As the orchestra swelled and more guests arrived, he slipped away quietly, loosening his tie as he stepped into the night. The city air was sharp and alive, filled with the hum of traffic and the distant rhythm of street musicians. For the first time that evening, he could breathe. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, only that he couldn't find it in gilded halls and crystal glasses. Walking alone down the busy sidewalk, he felt a restlessness stir in him, a hope, however faint, that somewhere out there was something real. Something unpolished, unpretending. Something that could finally touch his guarded heart. The wind whipped through the crowded street as Alexander adjusted his coat, blending in among strangers for once. He was still lost in thought when he noticed a young woman just ahead, her arms full with textbooks stacked high, a paper coffee tray balanced precariously in one hand. She moved quickly, her face weary yet determined, her steps carrying the kind of purpose that came from necessity rather than ambition. Suddenly, her shoe caught on a crack in the pavement, and everything tilted. Books slid, cups threatened to tumble, and for a split second the chaos seemed inevitable. Instinctively, Alexander lunged forward, steadying the tray before the hot drinks could spill across the concrete. Their eyes met, hers wide with surprise, his steady and calm. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice warm but hurried, the kind of gratitude that didn't linger or flatter. She didn't gush, didn't try to hold his gaze, didn't even recognize him as the man whose face often graced financial magazines. Instead, she bent quickly, scooping up her scattered books with the efficiency of someone who couldn't afford to waste a second. A strand of hair slipped across her cheek, and she brushed it back with the same no-nonsense focus. Then, with a faint smile, genuine, unpracticed, she nodded and rushed toward the coffee shop on the corner, disappearing into the bustle of customers. Alexander remained frozen on the sidewalk, staring after her. It had only been a fleeting exchange, but something about her simplicity, her realness, lodged itself in his chest. For the first time in a long while, he felt curious. The following afternoon, Alexander found himself walking past the same corner, telling himself it was coincidence. But when the familiar aroma of roasted beans drifted from the small coffee shop, his steps slowed. Through the glass window, he saw her again, apron tied tightly, hair pinned back, moving swiftly between tables with a quiet determination. Customers barely noticed her, but Alexander did. There was no pretense in the way she worked, no false charm, only focus, and beneath it, a softness in the way she smiled at a tired mother or slipped an extra sugar packet to an elderly man without being asked. He stepped inside, almost awkwardly, unused to waiting in line. When it was his turn, she looked up and blinked in recognition. "Black coffee?" she asked, as if guessing his order rather than trying to impress him. Her voice carried no eagerness to please, just attentiveness. He nodded, amused by her certainty. Over the next few days, he returned. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes with an excuse to read at a corner table, but always to watch her resilience. One evening, as the shop emptied, their conversation stretched. She spoke quietly about her life, working 3 jobs, caring for her younger brother since their parents passed, often skipping meals so he wouldn't go without. There was no self-pity in her voice, only resolve. Alexander listened, something shifting inside him. In boardrooms, strength was measured by power plays and profits. But here, In this small coffee shop, he saw a different kind of strength, humble, selfless, and far more beautiful than any glittering gala. The seasons shifted, and what began as brief conversations over coffee blossomed into something neither of them had expected. Alexander found himself craving her presence more than any deal he had ever closed. Emma, despite her hesitation, allowed her heart to soften, trusting the kindness she saw in him. They built their bond in small moments, late-night study sessions he quietly funded with snacks, walks through the park where he listened more than he spoke, laughter that felt startlingly natural for two people who had known so much weight. But one evening, everything changed. Emma sat with trembling hands, staring at the result of a test she had taken in secret. Pregnant. The word itself was both terrifying and miraculous, yet fear rose higher than hope. She imagined the headlines, the whispers, the empire he had built being questioned. She imagined her brother's future collapsing under the shadow of her choices. And so, she began to pack. When Alexander returned and found her suitcase by the door, his heart sank. "Emma, why?" His voice cracked with disbelief. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she whispered, "I can't drag you into this. You deserve someone who won't hold you back." He stepped forward, taking her shaking hands into his. For a man who had spent years hardened by walls of distrust, his words came raw and unguarded. "The world showed me glitter, but you showed me love. Don't take that away. Don't walk alone, I want this life with you, with us." And in that moment, her fear began to loosen, replaced by a fragile, radiant hope. Spring sunlight spilled over the park, painting everything in soft gold. Children laughed in the distance, kites swayed in the breeze, and the world seemed quieter, gentler. On a bench beneath a blooming tree, Emma sat with her younger brother tucked close to her side, reading aloud from a worn library book. Her belly curved gently beneath her dress, a promise of the new life she carried. She laughed mid-sentence when her brother interrupted with a question, her voice light, her face glowing in a way Alexander had never seen before. He stood a few steps away, watching for a moment, letting the scene etch itself into his heart. This wasn't the glittering ballroom or the high-rise office he once thought defined success. This was something deeper, something true. He moved closer, kneeling beside her, his hand brushing over hers as he whispered, this is real." Emma turned, eyes wide with emotion, and in that shared silence, everything was understood. He didn't need the world's approval, and she didn't need to pretend to be anyone but herself. Together, they had created something far more enduring than power or wealth, family, rooted in love and sacrifice. As they rose to walk home, Alexander's arm wrapped protectively around her, Emma glanced up at him with quiet certainty. For the first time, neither of them felt alone. And as the sun dipped low, it seemed to bless their steps, reminding them that true elegance lives not in appearances, but in kindness, resilience, and love strong enough to transform even the coldest heart.